Welcome, welcome back to the Inner Storyteller. Welcome back to this channel. Welcome back to the channels, right? Including the Ufuluchild channel. I hope you guys are having a super duper great day. And I hope that you are kind enough and considerate enough and best friend enough and all things good enough to like the video. Okay. Especially in these first 10 minutes. Helps a lot. Super duper great. I do have the general goal of monetizing this podcast one day. And if you don't like the video, if you don't subscribe to the channels, good people, I may not be able to do that. Okay? Help me out. Please. If you are here at the Inner Storyteller podcast, you are in for real conversations about natural law, religion, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the great, money, anarchy, culture, and how mankind is manipulated by forces that do not have our best interests at heart because they are completely evil. We are not bashing faith systems here, right? I say we talk about religion. We do not bash people for having faith systems or anything like that. We are simply examining the psychological affects and effects of the stories that we have the most stake in, that we have the most faith in, and how those stories help shape society. And this examination sits right alongside an honest look at the current human condition. The current condition of the human family is slavery. Government is slavery. And the question that we have to keep coming back to is, what could actually be improved with a proper understanding of the inner storyteller and how it works? Now, if any of that makes you a little uneasy, makes you a little angry, then just know you are completely and totally encouraged to stay, but you are also welcome to leave. And with that being said, let's get into it. My girl, Candace. First of all, this channel likes Candace Owens. Okay? We do not bash Candace Owens on this channel. It's not what we do. That's not to say that she's some sort of perfect person. She's just awesome to me. So she just said the quiet part out loud. I don't even know if she really recognizes how impactful a few sentences that she said on today's episode of her podcast really are. She went off the diving board in a few sentences and she spoke almost directly to the philosophy discussed in my book, The Inner Storyteller, and on this channel, obviously, right? Directly to it. And I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the clip. Then I'm just going to talk about it. I actually don't have written notes today because I'm just excited that she spoke directly to the philosophy here. And I can afford to keep a few episodes relatively shorter than others. So we're going to shoot for, a not so close to 1 hour podcast today, maybe. And let's get into it. So let's hear what she said on today's episode.
ZA Mitch writes, Congressman Thomas Massey was France fade yesterday. Unfortunately, the battle is physical. The war is spiritual. Devil's overplaying his hand. I will leave it at that. It only works if people believe it's real. You know what I'm saying? Power works when people believe it's real, because power is actually quite fragile. So when people begin to recognize that they are being ruled over, like when the slaves look up and recognize that actually they're on a plantation, that's not good. It's one of the reasons why slaves are not allowed to learn how to read. the slave codes. Like it was actually such a insistent slave code that even if you were a slave owner and you were caught teaching a slave how to read, you would also face penalties and fines and punishment because, yeah, they need you to be ignorant. That's the point. They need you to be stupid. And people are not stupid right now. They get what's going on. And so I personally like the phase where they get arrogant. I like this phase where they start saying the things that they're saying. And like I said, I've seen it happen a great many times, and we are headed in that direction with the Epstein class. Two-Tone Tommy writes, there are two sets of cojones. Slaves are not allowed to. People believe it's real. It is spiritual. Devil's overplaying his hand. I will leave it at that. It only works if people believe it's real.
Good people in the pulpit. Good people. I was going to say of the jury. And then I was like, oh, is that a rip on Barron show? I don't know. Because I think he calls this audience the jury. Anyway, good people out there listening to my show. It only works if people think it's real. That's a very impactful statement. It's a very impactful statement because what is it? Obviously, she said power. Power is fragile. It only works if people think it's real. It's not real is the other side of the coin of that sentence. It's not real. Therefore, it only works if people think it is. And indeed, man's authority, man's law, man's moral relativity, okay? These things are built on the foundation of mind control and our obedience. They are not built on the foundation of natural law, nature, or evolution in any way, shape, or form. And because of that, they are completely unreal insofar as substance is concerned. They have no substance. What they do have is religious adherence from near 100% of the population of the world, right? Those who run governments are not tied to a specific country's jurisdiction. If you run the government, I don't mean the president. I mean if you are the actual top of the food chain, as we like to call it here, you are not subject to the same set of man's laws and man's rules as the 99%. So we have to understand these things, right? And we have to understand them so much that they become basic, because the information that follows, right, how they conduct their mind control, what symbols and things to look out for, what types of patterns of behavior and patterns of rhetoric to look out for, those aspects of this information are just as important as who you are, because this is, the influence that governs your behavior, is government, right? This religion of man's authority, man's law, moral relativity. Now, when I say moral relativity, what exactly is moral relativity? Well, moral relativity as a concept is the idea that morality can be different for some than it is for others, or that morality works differently in different regions of the world, or different, what's right for some people, what some people have more rights than others. And what's right for some people, is not okay, is wrong for others. Moral relativity has resulted in all governments, basically practicing things like, yeah, if you're over here, you have this set of rules. And if you're over there, you have this other set of rules. And these rules are based on our religious texts. And these religious texts are guiding moral teachings. And therefore, all of these rules are moral in nature. This is not true, but this is how they present governing. They say all of these rules are moral in nature, right? They come from, inspired by the Bible, right? Kali Fontanilla came on the podcast. And she says she believes that that Jesus inspired governments, or God inspired governments. Sure, okay. Regardless, it only works. Power only works if people think it's real. Right? Let's go back to my girl Candace, revisit what she said next.
You know what I'm saying? Power works when people believe it's real, because power is actually quite fragile. So when people begin to recognize that they are being ruled over, like when the slaves look up and recognize that actually they're on a plantation, that's not good. It's one of the reasons why slaves were not allowed to learn how to read the slave codes. Like it was.
Okay. It's one of the reasons the slaves are not allowed to read. Now, what's happening in the school systems these days? What's happening? As a matter of fact, I just came across the most down-to-earth, super duper great YouTube channel, and this lady goes into exactly what's going on from the perspective of the people. I hope you guys can hear me when I look to the screen over here. Boom. Yeah, I want to go to that video. Okay. And then add this to the stage. Okay, so Candace just said, right? That is why the slaves were not allowed to read, right? Frederick Douglass famously said, an educated man is unfit to be a slave, right? It was written into the moral relativity practicing government's rules that you are not to teach your slave class to read. It was written into slave codes, right? Codes, statutes, ordinances, and whatnot. Very peculiar relationship there, right? To what is happening more and more obviously in our process of teaching the slave class how to read, which just means educate the slave class. Check this out. This is channel is a homestead journey clips, or a homestead journey. I guess there's two channels, a homestead journey and a homestead journey clips. And I'm not subscribed. It's just, this is just super fire. Check this out.
Right now speaking out about something, and what they're saying should really stop everyone in their tracks. They're saying that kids that are in elementary, middle school, high school, and even college level are struggling to read. And it's not just teachers that are saying this, parents are saying it as well.
Elementary school kids are not reading. Kids are not reading. Kids cannot read. It doesn't matter if your child's at an A school, or if your child's at a D school, or if your child's at a charter school or a private school. I have seen kids at all areas. They all struggle. They all struggle because they don't have exposure and they don't have consistency with reading. We can blame the Department of Education. We can blame the literacy rates being at an all-time high. We can blame the schools, the teachers, but education teacher of 4 years, I specifically teach kids with learning disabilities how to read and to read accurately. We're not talking about teaching kids to read with special education disabilities. We're talking about teaching kids to read that have not had that exposure and that just cannot read, and no environmental factors included. Exposure and consistency. These two things are most important when reading, and these kids are not exposed to reading at a young age, and they do not have consistent reading, whether that's
right? We're not exposing them to reading. When the last time you read a book, audience? You know what I'm saying? That you had the book, it was printed, and you read it cover to cover. Right? My wife still does this. And I don't. I'm not trying to put myself above anybody. I'm saying we don't expose that. I'm going to start, now that this is becoming a thing in my head. I just saw this video today again. But the last book I read cover to cover was mine. And I did so via digital devices. Right? I didn't read my book cover to cover printed. And there's something about that. There's something different about opening, closing a book, right? Bookmarking it, coming back to it, opening the pages, sensing all of your senses going off as you open the pages, and then your mind kind of, mindscape opens up into the story or into the information. And that's way different than, reading for like basic and quick comprehension from a screen. It's a completely different thing. So we're not exposing them to actual reading, right? No newspapers, nothing. We have our podcasts and we have our cartoons and things that we raise them on, the instant gratification type of programming that we just give them because it keeps them from clinging to us too hard or whatever reason. But we don't expose them to, here's what we do. We sit down and we make sure the lighting is okay. And we stare at these pages and something happens inside the mind. We get information. We expand our vocabulary. We don't expose them to reading, and we don't have consistency when we do expose them to reading. When we take the time to be intentional about making them read, we lose the momentum instantaneously sometimes. And it's a sad story.
At school, at home, they don't have enough exposure of reading in general. The perception of teaching kids to read is it is the teacher's job to teach their children to read. It is the school's job to teach their children to read. Have you been in a public education classroom recently? Teacher to student ratio makes it nearly impossible to differentiate all different reading levels consistently. And I'm talking every single day for targeted reading instruction. You can have the most experienced and most knowledgeable reading expert teaching your child. If you are not doing it consistently, and I mean at least 4 times a week, 15 to 20 minutes a session, it's not going to be effective. If you have elementary school kids that are reading at grade level or even below grade level, get them a tutor, get them extra support to give them those skills to have them be successful with reading. Reading is not meant to be natural, but you need consistency, exposure, and somebody that is qualified and knows the science of reading for it to be successful for any child in a short amount of time.
This person is asking, people often mention that students are losing their ability to read and write like they used to. Did you notice any decline in your last years of teaching? So I started teaching in 92. I retired in 2024. And I noticed a significant decline. And I will say there are a few different factors. I talked in another video about one of the factors being that students are not reading anymore. They're not reading on their own. They're not reading for class assignments. I stopped giving independent reading because students were just not doing it. And
listen to the point that she's about to make next is very important too. But you see, I stopped trying to give them on grade level reading assignments because she had to get through the rest of the information that leads up to the standardized, test, and whatever other reason. She had to move on somehow. So she stopped having them read on grade level material to get the on grade level information. And what she's about to say is important too, but just let some of these realizations about how the government school program is affecting the population of who will be the voters, the policemen, the firemen and rescue teams, the military personnel, soldiers, if you will, the low-level bankers, the low-level IRS, right? This is the generation that we're raising. And what Candace said, that's the reason why the slaves were not allowed to read, because it makes you unfit to be enslaved. And listen to what she's about to follow up with.
I stopped giving independent reading because students were just not doing it and were happy to take the 0 or the F or the D in order to not read the book. So they were actively trying not to read anything. I started reading to them, which definitely did help. But when you're not reading, you're also not expanding your vocabulary, and the way that you communicate also narrows as well. And another fact,
right? So there's limiting results to not reading. There's limiting results to the behavior that us as parents, us as a society, and us as teachers and mentors, guides, all of these things, aunties, uncles, don't. There's bad results if we don't take raising this next generation seriously. One of the key excuses, I don't want to be mean about it, but one of the key reasons given for not putting the time in that I hear over and over again in conversation is the money game. This religion of monetary value, this idea that in order to get things done and for things to move and for work to be done and ideas to be brought from the idea realm into physical reality, transactions have to happen. Transactions that are tied to valueless accounting concepts, right? And there's like this whole religion built around it, this whole banking system, money system, monetary value religion. I call it the religion of monetary value. That's the excuse. That's the reasoning given behind not raising our kids, not having them read, sending them to government school, allowing whatever the result is to be blamed on the child themselves, even though it's happening to multiple children from various backgrounds at various, sort of eras of time, with a huge spike in the decline happening during the experimental shutdown of the world. Remember, they shut the whole world down for COVID. And it's just a whole mixing pot that you really got to understand yourself, right? If you're on this channel, it's called The Inner Storyteller, because we're learning about the stories we tell ourselves ultimately, because those are the stories that have to change before we will actually see the change that we want to see individually in the world. Let's continue.
Factor that I started to communicate also narrows as well. And another factor that I started to notice, especially around like 2022, was a lot of students just don't care. And that's heartbreaking. It really, really is, because they don't care that their grades are low. They don't care that they're not reading. And when I had honest conversations with some of my students, I got the constant refrain that nothing is going to work for them anyway. They're never going to be able to get ahead. They're never going to be able to own a home. They're never going to be able to raise a family like their parents and grandparents did. So why?
They scared to get pregnant. And I don't mean teen pregnancy, but because we're talking about students, so let me clarify. But they're scared to one day have that be the case, to when they're old enough and legal and whatnot, when they expect themselves to naturally have relations with people in their peer group, they are afraid to be pregnant. They are afraid of the I don't know, prospect is the right vocab word, but they are scared to have a family because of all of the money game reasoning. Something just doesn't feel like excuses is the right word, but reasoning doesn't feel right either, but it feels too broad. But anyway, what story are we telling ourselves that makes this okay? Right? What story are we telling ourselves that makes this okay to not even talk about? Why don't we even really acknowledge it? Right? What story are we telling ourselves that puts our kid back on the school bus tomorrow morning? We know it's going to happen. What is that? CPS, maybe? What is it? Because if we don't identify the story and at least see it for what it is, which is a story, whether it's a prediction, memory, or a little bit of both. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, whether it's a prediction or memory or both, we are bound to behave the stories that we believe. And so that is a key, sort of freeing instrument that we can hold on to, a freeing tool that we can hold on to and use in our daily, mental check-ins where we check in with ourselves and reflect on our own progress in fighting this beast of just the lies that we tell ourselves. Right? And notice, I'm not saying it's time to go out and get your guns and fight the government with like fire, trying to fight them with guns and stuff. Nope. How far are you going to get? How many people can you actually mobilize and whatnot before one of your people rats out your location to the wrong person? It's not practical, in my opinion. And, let he who is without sin cast the first stone, in a way, right? Doesn't mean be passive. Definitely defend yourself. Definitely defend the innocent. But it means don't go looking for trouble. So, but you don't got to keep your kids in these schools. You don't have to do that. We got 100 years of mandated compulsory public schooling, government schooling. Public just means government. And government means mind control. If you didn't know, government, the etymology of the word government breaks down into, I believe, the Latin root of gubernare, which means to steer, to control, and mens mentis, which means mind. So you got control mind or mind control. Okay, it's the word government. A group of people, linguists, were coming up with the English language, and they said, "Oh yeah, what about the rulership? Or English language or whatever first language that had government in its language. What concepts are we going to put together for the rulership, the ruling entity of these lands? What are we going to call that? What concepts are we going to put together and make a word for regarding our tribal leadership? Our version of a king and queen situation, royal family. Oh, we'll call it mind control. Okay, let's do it. Right. That is, that's why it only works. It only works if people think it's real. And with that being said, good people, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please like the video. Okay. Like the video, subscribe to the channels, Why not? Why not? It's free. It'll help me one day monetize this channel or monetize my podcast in some way, shape, or form. Share it out. Let me know what you think in the comments. You know, I never ask people to agree with me. I just try to state things that I believe are true. And so I speak in absolutes as if it is true because I believe it to be. But not because I think I'm right, just because I believe it to be true. And I'm open to being wrong, and I'm open to changing my opinions with information that is sound enough to break my foundation. And you should be like that too, in my opinion. You should be like that too. You should stand on your square and also be open to sound information that breaks your foundation, changing your opinion. And yeah, man, I hope you have a wonderful, super duper great day. I'm going to go hang out with my daughter and try to post some of these shorts in a timely manner. And y'all have a good one. See you tomorrow. Peace out.